I'm Patricia Thaine, co-founder of Private AI, and this is the Data Frontier podcast. Here we explore the frontier of data innovation where unstructured data meets real-world applications. Each episode brings together builders, engineers, data scientists, product leaders, and domain experts who are shaping the future of intelligence systems. From NLP and privacy to interoperability and AI-driven workflows, we unpack the tools, challenges, and breakthroughs transforming raw data into smarter systems, faster insights, and better solutions. It's my pleasure to have Ashley and Vinod join us today. Ashley, would you mind making an introduction of yourself, please?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me on this podcast. More recently, my work is focused on product AI. And so in my current scope of research interests, I'm working with LLMs for evidence synthesis and trying to streamline the research processes that can be more timely and consuming, like the screening of research abstracts for databases. And in my current position at Terry Fox Research Institute, I am the digital health and discovery platform program manager and partnerships developer. And so we are doing a very exciting initiative that relaunched January 2024 last year, and it focuses on pushing the data sharing boundaries within Canada. As the current landscape, we have all this data siloed among different hospitals and institutions, as well as data that resides from the industry side as well. So through our initiative, which is funded $49 million from the federal government, we plan to be the bridge between industry and the academic/healthcare side, so we can harness the value of data and foster more collaboration, research, development, and innovation. So I will leave my introduction there and pass to you, Vinod.
Thank you, Ashley. Great to be here with you. Patricia, thank you for inviting me to the podcast. And my name is Vinod Subramanian. I'm the Chief Operating and AI Officer at MedAdvisor Solutions. We are a global company focused on pharmacy-driven patient engagement. I've been in the industry for 30 years and excited about all things AI data, about driving and delivering patient-centric solutions that elevate the overall experience and supporting better outcomes for everyone. Excited about the discussion. Looking forward to having it.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Let's start with a bit of an overview of what kind of experience you have with handling data, making it more standardized, and what are some of the pain points that you're handling?
Yeah, Patricia, great question. See, I think before we touch upon the kinds of data, right? I think it begs the question, especially in the age of AI, topics on, who owns the data and what should data be? Because there are many aspects of data that is very relevant in healthcare today, but every single data point needs to serve the patient, who's the center and the beneficiary of everything. So it's extremely important, number one. Second thing is data, as we talk about, needs to be in a way where it drives privacy by design in any aspect of product that's being used, especially with AI. It needs to be in a way where it elevates the experience, but more importantly, patient safety. Right. So that's extremely crucial. The other most important thing from a data point of view is the data needs to be representative of the population that the product is serving or the entity is serving. As such, the data cannot have bias. The data cannot have aspects of the overall environment where it is serving and catering to the law of averages. It cannot have that. As such, you have to think about that, right? Before just saying, I'm going to use data. Data in, data out, garbage in, garbage out, right? So you have to think about that aspect before taking into account, what are you really doing? What outcomes are you looking to get? It needs to be multinodal and multimodal. Now, in our patient journey, as we call our journey, life is not straight. It is like going all over the place, as we know. We have our personal career, we have a family, we have friends. Sometimes we could be caregivers, right? So as such, there are many aspects of our journey which is not direct, straight, circular, and that again has to be something that is represented in the data. Unless and until that happens, how we use technology may not quite serve the end outcomes. So, there are many aspects of that. Today, we get the data from providers. The payer has got claims data. You have socioeconomic data. You have behavioral data. all the data is critical, right? And data has got plenty of gaps, as we know. And the aspect of it is appreciating, understanding that there are gaps, and leveraging that with that knowledge, so that way it doesn't say something else that you just jump to conclusions, right? If you start from a place where you know that there are gaps in data, it could get better, and based on what you have, you make your assumptions and leverage the product and technology to serve patients, get to a better place, right? I think that's a extremely important aspect that I know there's a lot more appreciation in the market today, rather than just saying, I just going to go buy data, right? And just say what happens. Yeah, I'm curious, actually, what do you see, right, in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll dive into my work, but I just wanted to call out on something that you said, which I think is so important, and um, trying to ensure the data is unbiased. So I come from maybe a biased perspective based on my background, but I almost believe that no data is unbiased. Always the opportunity to improve the quality of the data and also ensure the representation for the population that it's serving. So, although I wish I could say the data is unbiased, I truly believe that the field of responsible AI is a whole other dimension in itself, but completely agree with what you said about making sure the data ends up serving the end user, which could be the patient, could be the caregiver, the clinician. So first and foremost, for data sharing, we do have access to like publicly available data sets, but even so, there's issues with the quality of that publicly available data, the completeness, lots of missing values, and also access. So I've personally searched around for public data sets to work with, and it will say it's accessible and it's just not. So that's one layer. And then another layer is that the data that most would see as crucial and of high quality and reliability for these machine learning models would be the actual real world data, the patient data within the electronic health record systems, within the communities, the clinics, within the patient's hands themselves as well, including wearable data. And wearable data might also have questions around the reliability, the accuracy of the sensors, things like that. So this is where data standards, or at least best practices, they come into play to set the parameters for what is best right now. And although what's best right now is not perfect, that's where we want to advance towards in different areas of data and AI. So I don't think you can make advancements in AI without making advancements in cybersecurity, hence why your work is so relevant, Patricia. And so first and foremost, the data being brought into a platform that is going to be shared with others, it should bring some value, and it should have full transparency to those that are accessing or wish to access that data, to which degree it is reliable, what methods were put in place so they can ensure that the data is representative, it's not biased, and we don't end up with this garbage in, garbage out scenario. And so through my current work, we have experts involved that help us understand these best practices and inform the strategy. So we are planning to leverage the OMOP common data model through the DHDP platform, and that's going to help different disease areas and their different types of data be accessible through this platform. So a platform that supports different disease areas and also different types of data within those areas, including imaging, genomic, clinical data, but then also we have a strong pull towards the industry side as well. So industry, the types of data that we hear about is more like you mentioned, Vinod, the claims data, also different kinds of processes that those teams collect on a day-to-day basis. My perspective is there's always the opportunity for us to advance as a society, but the best practice, which we are leveraging, is the OMOP International Data Standard, which has shown success through its stories.
It's a great standard. There's no one size fit all, right? That's the beauty of the world we live in. Even regulations, right, when it comes to use of technology is evolving, specifically AI, right, in healthcare. I think data, while there are standards like we talked about, Omar, in oncology, right, you're still extending it into that area, right? I think the beauty is there's plenty of opportunities, and quality is getting better, completeness. Again, there are no standards, right? the value of what we bring, right, in a fast-moving, fast-evolving industry, specifically use of data and technology in healthcare, it's a great time to be, because all the things that you talked about, the main point that you hit, right, quality, completeness, this is exactly the time when there is more willingness for adoption thanks to COVID. You have an opportunity where we can think about how technology can be an enabler. Okay? What are the things that you need to? It needs to be secure, privacy first. It needs to serve the patient, and the ownership at any given time should be very clear. And once you think about all that aspects, the way you will take forward, I think those are your north stars that you're focusing on when you do research, when you do development of the product, and you take the product to the market. More importantly, you're listening to the patient as they're using it, and then the data gets better, right? When you're willing to do that.
Absolutely. And another best practice that we follow are the FAIR principles. So similar to the kind of keywords you're mentioning there in terms of the interoperability, the FAIR principle stands for making data findable. So not necessarily providing full access to a data set, but just the high level metadata that is needed to understand if the data is relevant for another collaborator's research and innovation. And then accessible, making sure the right data governance parameters are at play so that it doesn't end up being misused and so it's being used under its intended purpose. And then there's interoperability, which I think we touched upon with the data consistency and completeness, and reusability. I see there being lots of potential in the exploratory data analysis level, especially when there's large scale access or population level, even global level access. So it's really exciting time to be in this data era, and I think the work that you're alluding to with your company, Vinod, is also it's spectacular to see all of these different innovations come forward because we live in such a digital innovative era.
And the other piece, Ashley, right, is while the digital adoption has definitely increased, the aging population across the world is growing, right? I think I was reading the census says that by 2027, across the world, the aging population is going to be north of 45% of the world's population. So the aging population's needs for technology to interact and get services from healthcare is also going to be different. Another reason why, right, you have to think about that aspect of doing it in a way, right, where it serves the person, right, who's the beneficiary.
Can you take us through how in your stack have many of these concepts integrated? You mentioned, for example, making sure that the data doesn't have bias, but you also mentioned that there's a lack of accessibility to the data. There's more and more data that is available, but the standards aren't necessarily there. It's a lot of hoops to jump through. Are there any effective tips that you have about jumping through those hoops that you found in your own work?
Yeah, you want to go first, Ashley?
Sure. So it's interesting because DHDP, we're building out the technology and we'll provide the data enabling solution, if I may say that. But we do not decide upon the institutions themselves that are agreeing to share the data. It's fully their responsibility in terms of the review processes and making sure that's outlined in detail for the project proposals in terms of our funding call. So we provide that technology capability and leave it, for now at least at this stage, fully up to the data provider to outline what their requirements are and if they've fulfilled the institutional requirements. But we're also building out a privacy by design platform, and so there are less hoops, I would say, to jump through when it's federated learning and not very low levels of analysis being conducted. And then another would be meeting the industry standards. So the different kinds of regulatory and compliance under the Canadian law, but then also within provincial and then institutional requirements. So I think it's quite vague in terms of how we directly do, because we provide the solution, but not necessarily the specifics as we can. We work with academia, the public sector, and also industry, and they function entirely different. What do you think, Vinod?
No, it's true. I think you touched upon the most important points, Ashley. See, I think Each company I've worked right in the past 10 years have done that a little differently because, as you said, what you do for research is different from what you do for development. What you do for development is definitely different from what you actually do when you take a product to the market, right? So they are different layers and different times where you need different data. But the common thing, right, across the board is the data has to be, again, representative of what is the outcome you want to achieve, who is it serving, and how is it serving, right? Because if you think about it, some of the technologies today that are heavily being used in healthcare are workflow automation. They are backend. They are about reducing overhead of somebody picking up phone and calling their healthcare provider, or calling a pharmacy, or calling to take care of their claim in terms of insurance. Either way, there's a lot of administrative overhead that comes. When you think about that, that's a workflow solution that you're doing. You don't need patient data, but you need representative of that data. So that way you can leverage the right way of developing the technology. The second piece, right, is in pharma, um, the most important thing is about understanding the right target for a disease, or a right target for making sure that they can serve a population for a specific disease type, right? So there's a lot of drug discovery that you have to do, and then drug development. After that, you have clinical trials. There, actually, as you talked about, the data has to be not just representative, right? Data is clinically complex, highly contextual. It needs to have that context. It needs to be representative of that population. It needs to be clinically sound, right? It's a very, very nuanced thing. You cannot compromise that. You cannot say it's got gaps, right? Great, right? Let's just figure out how it goes. Let's roll the dice. You need the gold standard, which is why clinical trials data is extremely important in that setting. Now, once you go past that, right, you then go into a real world setting. In a real world setting, as you said, Ashley, right, even though health records have standards, there are gaps. As we speak, right, how you enter the data represents how the data is good or not, and the quality of the data. So if you think about technology there, interestingly, in the past 2 years, almost 99% of my interactions have been all using AI scribe. No more are the notes where somebody has to type. It's automatically getting into the system during an encounter with a professional, and then the healthcare professional is accepting or adjusting. So the quality is going to get better. That's another setting where you can think about how the data is going to now help you, because at that real world setting, that real world data is going to actually help in many ways, whether it's research, it's development. More importantly, right, it is that last piece of real world care, where whether it's happening in a hospital setting or it's happening in a pharmacy setting, where you're going and getting your drug or your medication that is being prescribed. You want to understand the dosage, you want to understand the side effects. There is specificity there. Without that specificity, you cannot personalize. For example, Vinod goes to a pharmacy, and Vinod is picking up a medication. If the pharmacist doesn't know that Vinod is taking a medication, and Vinod is also having other things, Vinod took a vaccination, he may be eligible, giving tools for me to manage my wellness, the pharmacist is just becoming very transactional. Same thing for a doctor. They become very transactional. You came here for a headache, I'll give you headache medication. But what if I came for something else? I may have diabetes, I may have low blood sugar. It could be a side effect of that. So you want to make sure that you're thinking holistically. For that, again, going back to the point you said, those data points are extremely critical, right? So the beauty of where things have evolved, no more are those where you just say aspirin, here's Tylenol, gone are the days. There is so much personalization and there's so much data available that there is a level of sophistication that you see that is taken for granted today, which is great. And the other piece that Patricia, you always talk about, right, is see, I think most of the time, right, I would say 15 years ago, the way we would do technology is, let's just come up with a great idea, unmet need in the market. Let's just go build a great technology. Oh, now we need to take it to the market. Let's think about where we need to go sort out. Let's get some data to just validate. Let's just get in it, right? Get quick validation, move on. Then we learn, right? Most of the learning happens after we take it to the market. Now, gone are the days, right? If you think about it now, there's no more band-aid at the end to apply privacy, information security, and then figure out, let's just make sure that this is right. It's very expensive. So today, what I do see is that the first thing in healthcare, when anybody thinks about taking a product services, is they think about privacy. Extremely important, right? If you lose the trust of the patient in the market, you can guarantee that the company is not going anywhere. because the trust is equal to the way you take. The brand gets associated. If you're trusted, then patients look to it for guiding them in the future. It's extremely important. So again, right, the work that you do is extremely important. It has become front and center in many companies, and even in simple things around, you want to assess a technology, you want to assess a business proposition, you want to think about R&D. You don't think about the unmet need anymore. You think about privacy. You say, is this the right thing to do? So it's become part of the language, right, and lingo that we all use, which is exactly what we need to do, right? So I think coming back to your original question, how we use the data, it is not as straightforward. It's not just about the data. It's about many aspects of what is the data being used, why is it used, who is it used for, how are we going to use the technology with the data, who's going to have access to it, how are we going to continue to learn from the data, dictates where you go get the data, what you do it for, the different levels at which you use the data. Is it anonymized data? Is it synthetic data? Is it real world data? All that plays into this entire equation. But I think you need all of that. You need all of that in different settings. You need proof points to be developed in a way where you can prove to yourself that you're doing the right thing. Then you kind of take the step function to say, got it, check, looks good. Now let's go to the next place. Let's use synthetic data. It looks good. Now let's take it to a real world setting. Let's get validation before you basically say, yeah, this is good, and let's put it in the real world setting as well.
And what we've heard from the patients, at least for the cohort of cancer patients that our organization is tied to, it seems that the patients definitely want their data shared. They want to have better treatment, better technology, earlier diagnosis, to know even the wait time within these settings.
Yeah.
Then it collides with things like the public eye and trust in the technology. And trust could be the number one most important factor for a technology success in the clinical environment, in my opinion, because if you have a fancy AI model that was tested across different hospitals and different institutions, and it's just not well understood, or it's the reason for false positive turning into a critical disaster that ends up on CBC News, then it's just not going to work out. I actually wonder, Vinod, how do you ensure trust with your services that you provide, and to know that, I assume NLP used with these scribes is producing reliable outputs that don't need to be cross-referenced back with the entire session.
Yeah, see, I'll tell you a story, right? It's not a name that we are all used to hearing, right? Kodak was a pioneer in all sorts of health tech. You will not believe it. 25 years ago, to be precise, they were doing research on early detection. So they were partnered with University of Rochester, and they were leveraging research techniques, right, specifically around oncology, and they were focused on aspects of breast and lung cancer to identify ways to detect the tumor early. As you know, early detection in cancer is extremely difficult. Even now, even with the technology, right, it's getting better, but it's not there, right? Especially, right, you have your rare cancers and complex cancers like pancreatic cancer. It's difficult to find, right, unless you have a way. You usually find it in stage 3 or stage 4. It gets late. Coming back to the point, they did research for 3 years to make sure that they are 100% sure that the tech will be able to identify the right thing. They have validation, they have proof points before they took it to the real world care, right, with the University of Rochester. But the point is that it was very, very forward thinking at that point in time. And unfortunately, as with anything that we know in case studies and whatnot, I don't think they were good in marketing and go to market aspects of the technology. They were great with research. The amount of things that they had done is unbelievable. Now, what I learned from that actually is not about the go to market, but about how do you prove to yourself that the data and the tech, right, actually works. It's a very difficult thing in a clinical setting. It's even more difficult in a real world setting. So what are the factors that you will account for to define, saying, here's my definition of done, right? In technology, we are very used to that, right? Definition of done, right? What is the definition of done? It's not easy for you to just say the definition of done is XYZ. It's not. If you think about it, right, at the good thing in the healthcare, if you go and ask a clinician, they're going to say that patient safety is number one and outcomes is number two. If you go and ask a salesperson, they're going to basically say getting the service with better experience is the right thing. If you go and ask the product person in the same setting, the product person is going to basically say, I need to first get experience. I don't know what it is. I'm envisioning this, but until I put it out there, I don't know. So I want to put it out there. If you go and talk to the engineer who's developing it, they're going to basically say, get it out in 1 week. Let's just find out, break fast, either works or doesn't work, but I need to know in a week's time. And then you go talk to the security professional, they're going to be like, you're not taking, first prove it to me that this is actually secure. You have accounted for privacy. There are compliance aspects of it, whether you're complying with ISO, you're complying with HITRUST, you're complying with GDPR, prove it. Then we'll talk about it. You see, there's so much dichotomy right there. And then you have to think about the patient. Who's thinking about the patient? Have we asked the patient what they want? You made the point very clearly that the patient is willing and consenting to many aspects of it, whether it's engagement, whether it's for research. So I think there are a lot of dichotomies, even beyond the technology itself. There are so many dichotomies that is very business oriented and more about care. That has to be something that evolves. So fast tracking today, what we do is about that patient safety, privacy first. The first and the foremost question that we ask ourselves is, are we compliant with the external compliance factors that govern our industry, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's ISO 27001, very soon ISO 42001 is going to become relevant, GDPR, any policies and regulations that are developing in Australia and New Zealand. So we look at that first and say, okay, are we covering? Great. What is the use case, right? Can we think about the use case and make sure that if you think about it end to end, it is done in a way where the patient data is secure, it supports the patient experience, it gets the outcome we need, and the patient is consenting. Because if you think about messaging, a good example is you get reminders from your pharmacies today. It's across the world. It's a very common thing. Now you have to consent to make sure that you're getting reminders, right? You cannot just basically say, just because I downloaded an app, my pharmacy can send anything they want. You have to consent, right? In the digital world. Even if you are just getting a printout, Ashley, when you walk into a pharmacy, you got to agree to it, right? So I think that is a very big portion of what we do today, consent, right? Patient consent across the board, whether it's from a lens of provider, payer, pharmacy, right? You have to account for that. And then the last and the most important thing that we talk about, now, how do we manage it? If you think about it, you have data for the product itself and the use case. Then you have privacy aspects of it like consent, compliance. You have to think about the various aspects of data lifecycle management that you have to account for. And then the aspect of proving that you indeed are on top of all this before you actually say, let's now take to factor the development aspects of it. I think that's where it's gotten better. I'll say you don't need 3 years, but you definitely need more than 3 weeks, right? To think about all these, put it together, make sure that everybody understands in the mix that, what does end to end mean? You cannot in silos work anymore. Both of you know this and you can appreciate it. Now, I think the beauty of the way we are is everybody understands the aspect of privacy. There's nobody in the world today, right? Especially working in tech, in healthcare, are going to basically say, let's get a product, let's get AI to develop it, let's take it to market in 1 week. You cannot do that, right? Nobody's going to do that in the right way. So I think the beauty of that is that there is awareness. The second piece is there is enough and more checks and balance that will enable us to do the right thing. This is quite exciting to be in this area. You're not fighting the system. You don't want to push back. Everybody is like fighting against to say, let's just make sure that you're doing the right thing. And the right thing is from a patient's lens. Then everything else falls in place. Based on the use case, you create your definition of done and you work through it.
If we take both of the ends that you two work on, you work on the pharmaceutical compliance data. So are people taking their medication? And I believe you also work with the pharmaceutical companies. Am I mistaken in saying that?
Yeah.
You do? And then Ashley, you're working on the research side. Vinod, you're putting this in a patient perspective. Is this the best thing for the patient? Ashley, you're working on research that may never reach the patient's ears, right? There's still this gap when it comes to the patient really understanding what kind of care might be available to them in the first place. What's the latest research? If we were to have an end-to-end system that bridges what you do, Ashley, with what you do, Vinod, what do you think that could look like? Do you think there would be a benefit to it?
Yeah.
It's,
Good, Ashley.
Amazing question, Patricia. So I'll maybe make some clarifications because although my background is primarily from the academic and the healthcare side, Terry Fox Research Institute, the DHDP initiative actually taps more so into the industry, but also academic slash healthcare. And I I personally believe that we were given the opportunity to take on this initiative because we're not for profit and we're founded on the Terry Fox vision to make healthcare better and serve the patient at the end of the day. So I guess I can speak from two different lenses. I don't have too much experience from the industry side, but definitely this initiative has brought me closer and has shown me the differences, especially with speaking with different individuals, including now yourself, Patricia, and also you, Vinod. The DHGP platform is meant to digitally enable data sharing across different institutions as well as companies. Because we're pan-Canadian, that's why the funding opportunity focuses on inclusion of the 2 Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises. It's sort of unique because we see all these different data sharing initiatives in Canada, but not many, or not to my knowledge, that are pan-Canadian across all of the different provinces and also open to academic research, but then also from the industry side. I see great opportunity in terms of the international scale as well. I think because we're at the stage of technology development and this funding opportunity targets the Canadian SMEs, it's more so about what international collaborations would find value in. Is it worthwhile for them to participate in this kind of funding opportunity? But definitely in terms of the long-term sustainability aspect, like I mentioned before, the power of large-scale exploratory data analysis at a national scale would be amazing, to have the ability to find different data sets across all of Canada in specific cohorts that you're looking for. And then if you apply that to a global scale, that would also allow us to strengthen connections and innovations between the countries. So I can't really answer straightforwardly, but I'm happy to connect more later on as well, and as we define that long-term sustainability plan, because currently we have the project completion date in March 2027, and I believe that lots of opportunities tie back to the funding and the resourcing as well as the strategic alignment.
It sounds like a loop, right? Between the research that you're doing, the data that you'd like to gather and that you are gathering, and then all the way to which point in time Vinod and their technology work. Vinod, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think the points you talked about, actually, the data sharing is a big part, and it's an important piece because you do need data in a way where it's federated, it's accessible, and supports outcomes in healthcare. I do see that in the next 10 years, I think different platforms in the industry is going to become a very big play, similar to what Amazon mean for e-commerce, or the way we do our banking today in terms of authentication, blockchain. You have many aspects of that is evolved, but I do think that the platform play end to end, where it connects the ecosystem with patient in the center, whether it's from a drug coming from a pharmacy where they want to make sure that the patient is getting the right drug the right way, or it's from a provider where they want to make sure that the patient is taking the medication in the right way, or the pharmacies are looking at it to make sure that the patient is not only taking the right way, they're aware of side effects, understand the dosage. If there are multiple medications that they're taking, they understand how, and if they need any support and education, they're getting it at any given time. And more importantly, from a payer point of view, quality of the care, right, is front and center. So for all that, right now you have disparate systems, fragmented data, and slowly but steadily you see platforms coming up. And as platforms come up, even if they are for specific areas, whether it's pharmacy, pharma related, or provider related and payer, slowly they're going to start integrating, not in a way where it's free for all, but it is going to get to that ecosystem where it connects, and it connects in a way where it's seamless, it is secure, but it enables ease in managing and serving in healthcare. Because we talk about patients a lot, but think about the healthcare professionals who have to navigate through this. They have to go through 10 different systems. And on top of that, they have to do their work, which is what they're passionate about. They didn't study to come and do administrative stuff. They cared about patient, and that's their passion. Whether it's a pharmacist, whether it's a doctor, whether it's a researcher in a pharma site or anywhere else in an academic institution. So how do we make it easy for them to do it? So for that, the platform is extremely important and it is evolving fast. We focus on that as well at MedAdvisor. And I think previously when I was at SciApps and even before at McKesson, that was a very big piece, right? We strongly believe that it is the platform that's going to drive. When you have that notion, slowly standardization takes into effect, right? Whether it's privacy by design, aspects of fair to make sure that the data is used, you have data for the right purposes, and more importantly, the outcomes are all connecting because that way you have one place or a central system. You don't even need to have one place that supports things end to end from the way where the patient starts from a patient angle or the patient journey all the way till they get to an outcome or they have tools to manage it, or from a healthcare professional's point of view where healthcare professional is not one on the provider side. There are many touch points that happens with pharmacies and pharmacists, with people on the payer side who are making sure that they're looking at quality. More importantly, aftercare. There are home care aspects that comes into play as well with aging population. Or you look at the research persona where now they're looking at it from an angle where can we detect disease early? How are we managing diabetes? Rare diseases. You have many aspects of oncology and cancer, diabetic care, neurology. You keep talking about that different personas. All of that, it's not about one and done. There's touch points that you have to think about. How does it connect? So the connected world is going to be driven by platform, Patricia. And I do think that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more of that connecting. How Amazon has become central for everything, or Instacart, or any other ecosystems that are evolving. I do think that healthcare platforms are going to become the future. Not only driving experience, reducing expense, improving accessibility, accounting for the socioeconomic changes and gaps across the world, and making sure that care is affordable, care is available for everyone when they need, and care is the central part that we cannot just take it for granted, but it should be taken for granted.
And I really appreciate this line of thinking in terms of taking lots of steps back when you're looking at the use cases from end to end. Just tying back to your question too, Patricia, the technology that we have is still in development, and so before we jump forward and think about how we can have new collaborations among different countries, we also need to build the capacity to have a very robust platform at play that can support that sort of functionality. So it's really interesting to hear your take on how to build adaptive expertise and just overall capacity to have alignment on the use case. And I'm sure that helps facilitate your process with the proof of concept and being really careful in the methodology for evaluation, because something that I personally feel is that there's lots of technology advancing over time. It is hard to keep up, but if you are able to evaluate a technology and have rigid methods to demonstrate that, and are able to also implement practices like continuous monitoring, having someone accountable to those kinds of tasks, then it most certainly can gain the trust, even if the end user, the diverse end user base that you've been pointing towards, and especially the patient. So patients come in a form of myself, as both of yourselves, as any user, no matter what age, ethnicity. And so the literacy aspect in terms of health literacy is also being combined with technology literacy and data literacy. I see the power of information in terms of transforming that data into it being interpreted and applied as it's intended for the use case. And it sounds like you have very careful methods in place for this process.
Yeah. No, very true. I think you just hit it right on, because data, if you don't attach context, you don't attach emotion, and you don't attach the journey, it's just data. For the data to become information and in turn knowledge, there is work that happens. That's what we call the journey in technology. And I think methodology also, as with the research setting, actually, you will appreciate it, Patricia. You can relate to it as well. It is not one methodology that just fits everything. It is different, and sometimes you'll have to develop new things based on what you already have, because the use case defines what you're going to do, right? And the outcomes dictate how you define your use cases. So I think envisioning what you want to do defines how you're going to do about it. The first thing you have to think about is, what do you want to do? Why do you want to do? And then think about how you want to do it. Because often in the fast moving phase, we just think about how. That you get an idea, let's think about how. And I think that has to change, which is something that in healthcare, right, you often have a tendency to ask why and what more, and naturally enables the technology use as well. But I think the point you made, actually, it's a very important point. You have to think about the notion of understanding the data, methodology, and you have to be intentional, and you have to have the purpose very clear. Intentionality is not something that you just say, let's fast develop something fast and break fast. That is there. You definitely need to take technology and innovation quickly to the market. But I think if you're not clear about the purpose, you're not clear about what intentions, and then match the intention with the right actions, the last thing you need to think about is privacy, right? And the last thing you need to think about is patient, right? It's going to create a lot of chaos and a lot of money wasted. But I think that's where in healthcare, the use of technology is driving that balance, because every individual today, first question they ask is, how is this serving the patient? Who's the ultimate beneficiary? How are we thinking about making sure that we are making it easy for the healthcare professionals? How do we enable tools for the researchers in the industry to bring innovation to the market? How do we make sure that regulations are becoming standard and you don't have to think about it as a band-aid? How do that become integral to everything that we do? That's where I strongly feel that technology plays a role, because many of this is rule based. Some of it is subjective, some of it is interpretation. But I think once you leverage technology to get as much as possible in a way where you are taking the knowledge, as we call tribal knowledge, right? Experience, translating that into something that you don't have to second guess. You get closer to that more rule based, more defined definitions. As regulations and compliance frameworks across the world improve, then it gets better. And I think that's where AI can also play a very big role, right? Because if you and I can do certain things, there's a reason why we're doing it. It can be replicated, but the creativity cannot be replicated, because when you're doing new things, you have to think about it. That's the human intelligence. You can augment that with other things that we've already done in the past, but the human intelligence is very unique. That's where the creativity comes into play. So again, bringing it back to healthcare setting, that's a beauty, because now you can think about it, translate with technology as we move on to other things that we need to solve. There are many, many things that we need to solve. You still have to think about, how do we sort out cancer? That's a big question. Even with technology today, you barely scratch the surface. We still don't know what triggers happen and why certain things happen in a certain way. That's where I think the promises of the future, where technology is going to be an enabler. But I think we do need to be intentional about it. We need to be clear about the purpose. And more importantly, we need to keep talking. Once you keep talking, I think it'll automatically connect and it'll get us to a better place together.
Definitely. And I think the intentionality is so important. If there's one takeaway I have from my master's program, is don't focus on a problem just because you have the data. Solve real problems that have high impact. Focus on high risk areas that can unleash potential, or find the blue sea. I think it's the blue sea. So then you can do a lot with just that one discovery.
Yeah. It's funny, in a business setting, on a lighter note, we have this notion where when we start going in circles, we say, while every problem will have a solution, you cannot have every solution having a problem. So you have to think about those in a way where problems are huge opportunities today, huge opportunities. But the lens you use to look at the problem does matter, because if you don't, you look at it from a right aspect, right? It doesn't have to be everyone's looking in the same way. But again, the North Star that you talked about, actually, then I think it gets to a better place. Otherwise, every solution is a problem. You're going to find ways to stop and block yourself. You don't want that. You definitely don't want that in healthcare, because every patient is looking for that next drug, or a better therapy or targeted therapy, precision medicine that enables them as a person. Because you and I, while we are human beings, our DNA is different, our ethnicity, gender, everything is different, which means we cannot be treated the same way. Even if it is just headache, it has to be something that is unique to us as an individual. How do you do that? There's no answer. So you got to start from that what and why question and then go to the how. So yeah,
And
great point.
yeah, no, I mean, you're making me think of many different thoughts as you're speaking, because if it were just that way in which the data only existing right now is used to solve problems, then actually there would be a huge equity gap in that case, because social determinants of health and those different kinds of indicators for ethnicity, for example, it's still a pressing problem, given that historically the research data collected in these clinical trials is predominantly white populations. It's a problem that has gained lots of attention, and I think now we're at a stage where it's about how can we harness this data? How can we identify rare data or scarce data and collect it all together? And how can we collect more of it? And more importantly, the data sovereignty, which I think you've touched on quite a bit in terms of the data being used as intended by the patient for the patient. What made you interested in kind of pursuing this opportunity to take such an innovative approach to making a difference in healthcare? I'm sure it's not something that you just think about overnight.
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you think about it and just think about your work that you do, actually, you can work in any industry and all of us need a paycheck. But I think there are very few, in my view, where you not only have an impact and at the end of the day, you feel that you did something very meaningful and also make a living. And that I felt only in healthcare because I've worked in high tech. I worked in finance industry. I've also worked in aspects of healthcare in the past, but I've never gotten the satisfaction that I get today where it is having an impact. My work is directly having an impact in a way where I'm doing something meaningful. I'm helping an individual or individuals in their journey to have tools to manage wellness the way they want it. That's quite satisfying. It has been, I would say, 12, 13 years since I've been in the industry. At this point, my career, I will not work in any other industry because that satisfaction is paramount for me. The second piece is going back to the point you mentioned earlier. There are a lot of things that starts clicking when you constantly are trying to solve problems because your questions are constantly coming. That is quite satisfying because every day you're encountering something new. And interestingly, in the data world, we are going to encounter things that we don't even have data for, especially in healthcare. The future is going to be amazing. But the point is that you're encountering things where every day you're asking the why question, why? And there are constraints and there are challenges. And that is actually great because you don't innovate when you have everything. Because if you have everything, I can guarantee you, you're not asking the why question. You're not working under constraints. You're not challenging yourself in a healthy way. And then the last thing, when you work in a setting where there are like-minded people like yourself working together, oh my God, that is infectious because everyone is like constantly challenging in a way. They're asking the question, you're learning from them saying, oh, I didn't even think about it, right? How did you connect that dot? And it's across time zones. It's not in person all the time. It's across countries in some cases. You learn something amazing. It's a culture where while it is not perfect and it is definitely evolving, you are in a culture where you're constantly learning. That is the best place to be. And you're doing something meaningful and it's highly impactful. And at the end of the day, even if you put long hours, you don't feel tired. You feel happy and you feel excited on starting the next day. And when you get off your computer and you spend time with your family, you feel happy about it. And you don't have to worry about it. You're not constantly being driven by some email and things like that. For me, that is very important. So it's not just a paycheck, right? It has to be meaningful for me. And that's what got me in healthcare.
How about you, Ashley?
So much that you said, Vinod, that I resonate a lot with, especially in terms of the impact in healthcare. That's really why I pursued healthcare to begin with and was drawn towards health informatics because I wanted to make an impact. I didn't see myself as frontline clinician, and I saw the curiosity and creativity I have with data and analytics and that sphere. And I think when I discovered that opportunity in terms of what I can do for a living, it's something I've been passionate for, especially because of the current healthcare system. And I've firsthand seen the challenges, and healthcare is so, so behind in terms of the innovation. The clinic just nearby, they don't even have a digital booking system. So I just know that there is a whole world of opportunity, and it's so complex because in my experiences, I think from my education, I was very much inspired when I had my introductory courses. But then in the real world settings, when I was supporting different product implementations, you see the change management and the stress at play. And it's these two different perspectives, just one perspective full of innovation, opportunity, the ability to make a huge difference in patients' lives. Because the reason why I think healthcare is so important is healthcare is where people are hurt the most. That's where they have pain. And if you can alleviate pain for a patient or a family and do that through technology that they trust, even maybe more than the provider that they're seeing, or faster than the provider that they're seeing, then I think there's a difference at play at the individual level, putting the control back into the patient's hands, but then also all the way up to the macro level where the government can see the high level consented data that has been provided and make policy level decisions that have downstream effects. So it's very close to your perspective too. And this is definitely not a space where someone can open a company or open some kind of entity and do it as one person. Collaboration needs to occur for success, because I don't know the half of what the software engineer or the policy analyst or the privacy officer, I don't know half of what they know. And they also don't know what we bring to the table either in terms of our intersectional lens as well. I
Yeah, great
almost
point.
want to pose it back to you, Patricia.
Yeah,
What got me into healthcare or interested in healthcare? I think when it comes to data, the responsible use of data is something that healthcare has been worrying about for quite a while, which it was present in financial institutions as well, but it's not something that is pervasive across industries. And with responsible use of data, with appropriate data structuring, with the appropriate platforms, there is such a wealth of knowledge that we can gather as a society. And if you're healthy, that's the most important thing. Very, very keen to see where the field is going, especially with the many changes going on from a regulatory perspective with regards to how we're seeing AI becoming medical devices, how we're going to do the validation of these models, and how we're going to be connecting end to end the system from research all the way to drug delivery.
that's it. Yeah.
With that, is there anything else that you both would want to say before we close up? Any final words that you'd like to say to the listeners?
Good, Ashley?
To anyone listening, if you're interested in pursuing health informatics field, always feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. There's a lot of talent that I think can transform the rest of our society, and so it's not for everyone. One thing about this area is it's a field of information, and sometimes there's a lot of information. It's hard to wrap your head around it. So, like you mentioned, Vinod, it's very important to be able to take some downtime, not thinking about the data, information, and all the moving parts. But I'm always open to more discussions on health informatics, data, AI, and yeah, we'll stay in touch as well.
Yeah, nicely said, Ashley. I think today world's biggest problems are biggest opportunities, right? Thanks to technology. But it's about the impact more than anything else. And the place you start matters. Technology is not the answer. It is definitely an intent amplifier. I think the fundamental question that we all face, right, in healthcare and what we think about a lot is what is the intent? What are we trying to shape? And why is this important for me as an individual? Why is it important for the industry, the patient, and who are we really serving? I think that sets the tone in making sure that there are people first approaches to applying tech, leveraging data, and humanizing the work we do. It sets the tone for us. It sets a tone for the work we do, sets a tone for the company culture that we are in or in any setting. And more importantly, right, it is at the intersection of the passion that we have, the unmet need in the market in front of us, and also, right, the opportunity to work with people, right, who are like-minded in enabling that, right? So it's a great place to be. And more importantly, I want to say thank you for facilitating this, Patricia. It was great to connect with. Actually, I learned a lot personally, and more than a podcast, I think it was a great conversation. It's been a while since I thought about many aspects of what we discussed today, but I think that is the satisfying part of this work, where when you contemplate and use the contemplation to think ahead, it is just an amazing place to be, and it's quite exciting. So thank you for hosting us.
Thank you so much. You were both a wealth of knowledge, and very grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Patricia.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, a quick note about the company I co-founded, Private AI. We help organizations use their data safely so they can build compliant AI products, share data securely, and extract insights without the regulatory headaches. If PII, PHI, or PCI data are standing between you and your next innovation, visit private-ai.com. See you next time on the Data Frontier.